April 1979. 15-year-old Sean McGann left his parents' home in Northampton with a £1 in his pocket and a promise that he wouldn't be home late. He was heading to the Easter fair, but he never returned. The following morning, Sean's body was discovered strangled in an alleyway more than a mile away. His jacket, glasses, and underwear were missing. And despite one of the largest investigations in Northamptonshire's history, nobody has ever been brought to justice. More than 47 years later, the murder of Sean McGann remains one of Britain's most haunting unsolved child killings. Welcome to Crimes That Haunt Us, where the coldest cases are never forgotten. Subscribe now and join us for a new investigation every 2 weeks. Sean McGann came into this world on January 14, 1964, into an Irish Catholic family in Northampton. The family made their home on Kettering Road North in the outer suburbs. His parents were his mother Mary McGann and stepfather Dave McGann, who ran a successful automobile parts shop in town. Sean had 2 siblings and was described as a much-loved son, brother, grandson, and nephew. Family portrayals consistently describe him as a shy, gentle, quiet, polite, and well-behaved, not someone prone to trouble or risk-taking. He attended Thomas Becket Upper School, a local comprehensive school where he was described as shy and studious. He enjoyed spending time with his family as well as horses and horse riding. The family maintained close ties with the grandparents who lived in the nearby Victoria Gardens area. Sean's best friend was John Condon, another 15-year-old from a similar Irish Catholic background who attended the same school. Like Sean, he too was regarded as a quiet and polite teenager. This friendship would later intersect tragically with the case. At the time of his death, Sean had only recently celebrated his 15th birthday. The 17th of April 1979 was the Tuesday after the Easter bank holiday weekend. Sean visited his grandparents' home in Victoria Gardens, as he often did, maintaining those close family ties that meant so much to him. Sean was excited. He would soon be heading to the Midsummer Meadow Easter Fair in nearby Beckett's Park, approximately 800 meters from his grandparents' home. The travelling fair visited Northampton regularly, around 6 times a year, and was a popular attraction for children and teenagers like Sean and his friends. His grandfather, Mr. Pat Moylan, had proudly handed him a £1 for spending money. At 5:30 p.m, Sean left his grandparents' home in Victoria Gardens and headed towards the Midsummer Meadow Easter Fair in Beckett's Park, promising that he would not be home late. Little did his grandparents know that this would be the final time they would ever see their beloved grandson alive. That evening, Sean's hometown 4th Division football team, Northampton Town, would defeat Crewe Alexandra 3-1 at home in a hotly anticipated clash. The locals were jubilant and the atmosphere across Northampton was electric. It remains unconfirmed whether Sean ever reached the fair. Police received differing, uncorroborated sightings, but nothing definitive. Contemporary reporting of the case mentions witnesses seeing Sean present at the Funfair just 11 hours before he would be found dead, indicating that he likely did attend the carnival. Nevertheless, Sean failed to return home that evening, triggering deep fear and anxiety in both his parents and grandparents alike. As the hours passed and concern steadily grew, Sean McGann was reported missing. At approximately 8:10 a.m. on the 18th of April, a local resident named Irmgard King, the mother of a serving policeman, happened upon a horrifying scene. While walking to work through the cobbled service alleyway at the rear of Birchfield Road East in Abington, roughly 1 to 2 miles from both Sean's grandparents' home and the fairground area, she discovered Sean's body. Initially, she believed he may have fainted or been taken ill. However, after noticing his shoes were off and attempting to speak to him, she quickly realized something was terribly wrong. The teenager lying before her was dead. Being the mother of a policeman, she left the scene untouched while alerting the authorities. She later returned herself to prevent others from disturbing it. Police, followed closely by detectives, quickly descended on the scene and cordoned off the alleyway and surrounding area. The media at the time would repeatedly refer to Sean as having been found beaten, though later reports stated he had in fact been asphyxiated. Police noted the condition of the body as partially clothed. Sean's black wet-look leather jacket, described as campery orange and black, size 32 inches, along with his glasses and underwear were missing and have never been recovered to this day. His shoes and belt were found a short distance away. There were no signs of robbery. A post-mortem would show that Sean had died from asphyxia, although this information would be kept from the public until a year later when the coroner's inquest finally laid bare the truth surrounding his cause of death. The post-mortem also determined that Sean had eaten a meal sometime after leaving his grandparents' home in Victoria Gardens at 5:30 p.m. There was no evidence of sexual assault, but investigators, both in 1979 and during later reviews of the case, came to believe the killing was sexually motivated, citing the partial undressing, the disposal of the body in a secluded location, and other contextual factors. On a wall beside the body, police noted chalk graffiti written just above where Sean lay. The messages read, "Very sorry," and "No, I'm not." These unsettling inscriptions would not be made public until 40 years later, during a police cold case review in 2019, with investigators stating they could not determine whether the graffiti was connected or unconnected to the murder. The family of Sean McGann were notified and faced the devastating task of identifying his body at the morgue. Their world was shattered. The community was outraged. The murder investigation was led by Detective Chief Superintendent Arthur Crawley, head of Northamptonshire CID. It was a major inquiry from the outset. Door-to-door inquiries in the Abington area began immediately. Searches of Beckett Park, the riverside and surrounding locations were conducted in an effort to recover Sean's missing belongings. Detectives prioritized the retrieval of his jacket and glasses, but little, if anything, of substantial evidential value is thought to have been found. A mobile police station was established near the scene as detectives began speaking with Sean's family, friends, and any potential witnesses who may have encountered him, either at the Funfair or somewhere along his route. In the days immediately following the discovery of Sean McGann's body, witnesses reported seeing a yellow car parked in Beach Avenue near the cobbled alleyway behind Birchfield Road East where Sean had been found. Two people were reportedly seen leaving the vehicle at around 12:30 a.m. on the morning of April 18th, during the early hours after Sean disappeared, but before his body was discovered. The vehicle was described as a yellow car, possibly a Ford Cortina, a common model on British roads at the time. As the investigation progressed, some reports refined the description further, suggesting it may have been a Ford Cortina Ghia. Detectives treated the sighting as a significant lead in the early stages of the inquiry. They appealed for the owner of the vehicle or anyone with information about it to come forward. However, despite their efforts, the lead would ultimately prove to be a dead end, with detectives unable to trace the car or its occupants. Investigators also interviewed Sean's best friend, John Condon, in the hope that he might provide some clue that could help identify Sean's killer. But Sean was unable to assist them with their inquiries. Police also began exploring another theory almost immediately. Detectives considered the possibility that Sean may have died at the hands of football hooligans who had attended a match that day at the nearby Northampton ground, close to where his body would later be discovered. On the evening of Tuesday, April 17, police had broken up a fight between supporters of Northampton Town and Crewe Alexander FC, prompting investigators to question whether Sean could have become an unintended victim of either group. Sean is believed to have been passing through the area around the time on his way to the fairground. On April 20th, detectives then travelled from Northampton to Crewe to begin questioning supporters known to have attended the match. Leaflets containing details of Sean's murder were distributed as officers sought to uncover any information that might assist them. A total of 25 Crewe supporters were believed to have attended the game in Northampton. 4 days later, April 24th, police staged a reconstruction in an effort to jog memories. A boy dressed in clothing similar to Sean's, including an anorak and glasses, was paraded around the pitch before the Grimsby Town and Northampton Town match that evening. Investigators hoped the reenactment might trigger a recollection from someone who had seen Sean on the night he'd vanished. Nothing of substance emerged from this exercise. Thus far, police had drawn a complete blank. This brutal crime appeared to have been entirely random. Over the next 2 months, Northamptonshire police relentlessly focused their attention on the gay community, both in Northampton and further afield. It had emerged that the cobbled alley where Sean's body was discovered was known as a clandestine meeting place where homosexual men would gather. Detectives began contacting known homosexual men and requesting details of their whereabouts on the night Sean disappeared. The tactic quickly attracted criticism. A prominent gay rights activist within the local community publicly accused police of harassing homosexuals and using the investigation as a pretext for wider scrutiny. Among those spoken to was Professor Trevor Thomas of Bedford. Thomas described being interrogated by detectives after they had received his name, along with those of 69 others, from a Northampton gay man. By this stage, Thomas claimed police had told him they had already questioned around 200 gay men as part of the investigation. He further alleged that some individuals he knew personally had faced indecency charges relating to incidents dating back 5 years after cooperating with detectives and confiding in them. Thomas argued that the investigation accounted to little more than an attack on the gay community, citing the fact that Sean's murder was not publicly believed to have been sexually motivated at the time. Meanwhile, detectives continued pursuing other avenues. By this stage of the inquiry, police had been receiving numerous reports concerning a suspicious vehicle believed to have been used to abduct and transport Sean. The vehicle was described as a Granada Ghia. A new theory began to emerge. Investigators considered the possibility that Sean had been lured away from the Funfair and into a waiting vehicle before being murdered and discarded roughly a mile away in the lonely cobbled alley where his body would eventually be found. Police concluded Sean had been killed elsewhere and that his body had been transported between 6:45 a.m. and 8:10 a.m. on April 18th. The body had been left in plain view. There had been no attempt to conceal it. No effort had been made to cover it up. Behind the scenes, forensic scientists appeared to have narrowed down the type of vehicle they believed had been used to transport Sean. They believed this vehicle was a Ford Cortina Ghia manufactured after August 1st, 1978. A possible explanation for this narrowing down is that they had found fibers from the vehicle's upholstery or paint flecks or other trace evidence that had been recovered from Sean's body, but these details are never made public. Police would eventually track down and analyze around 5,000 of these vehicles while also interviewing approximately 11,000 people. Unbeknownst to the media at the time, detectives had also arrested and questioned one man for more than 12 hours before releasing him without charge. But no further information regarding this individual has ever been made public. And despite the vast amount of work undertaken thus far, the investigation continued to struggle for answers. Then on October 5th, 1979, further tragedy struck Northampton. Roughly 6 months after Sean's murder, his best friend, John Christopher Condon, aged 15, died by suicide. He was discovered by his grandfather, Christopher Condon, in a bedroom at the family home on Burn Street, just 8 doors down from Sean's grandfather's own residence. Local newspapers drew parallels between the lives of the two boys. Reports from the time indicate John was found with a plastic or polythene bag over his head, consistent with asphyxia. He had been among the schoolchildren interviewed by police following his best friend's death, but he was unable to provide little advancing information to the investigators. Meanwhile, back in the incident room, the investigation into Sean McGann's death was growing increasingly cold. Each line of inquiry had been pursued with determination, yet none had delivered the breakthrough detectives desperately needed. The incident room gradually shrank and priorities inevitably shifted elsewhere. Despite a local businessman offering a £1,000 reward for information, the case reached a firm dead end. Then, on April 21st, 1986, Almost 7 years after Sean's murder, news broke across the United Kingdom that detectives were examining whether an organized killer, or even a group of killers connected to traveling fairgrounds, could be responsible not only for Sean McGann's death, but for a number of other unsolved child murders and disappearances. Detectives from 16 police forces across the UK descended on Scotland Yard in London for a multi-day summit involving senior investigators, forensic experts and other police personnel. The purpose of the gathering was to discuss 20 unsolved murders and abductions spanning the previous 8 years. Among the cases under review was that of 13-year-old Jeanette Tate, who disappeared from Aylesbury in 1978 and whose body had never been recovered. Sean McGann's murder was also among the cases being examined. Of the 15 child murders under discussion, roughly half involved victims who had been killed in the vicinity of a fairground. Investigators also noted that 2 victims had traces of a sleeping drug in their systems, while 9 of those cases were believed to contain possible homosexual links. Some detectives began to wonder whether Sean McGann's murder may have been one of the earliest crimes in a series of traveling carnival child killings. The possibility was chilling. If true, Sean's killer may not have struck only once. Following the summit, Northamptonshire police reopened and re-examined aspects of the McGann investigation, taking advantage of a newly implemented computer input system that allowed forces to share and compare information through a centralized database. The hope was that fresh technology might uncover links or patterns that had previously gone unnoticed. Then, on July 25, 1986, detectives revealed they were considering whether the murder of schoolgirl Sarah Harper might be linked to 9 other high-profile child murders and abductions that had rocked the United Kingdom. Sarah, a Salvation Army choir girl, had been abducted from the Leeds suburb of Morley on March 26, 1986. 4 weeks later, on April 19th, her body was discovered floating in the River Trent in Nottingham. The 9 other cases investigators believed could potentially be connected were those of Susan Maxwell, aged 11 from Northumberland, Caroline Hogg, aged 5 from Edinburgh, Linda Mann, aged 15 of Leicestershire, Sean McGann, 15 of Northampton, Vishal Malhotra, 9 of London, Jason Swift, 14 of East London, Christopher Laverack, 9 of Hull, Imran Vohra, 9 of Preston, and Barry Lewis, 6 from South London. The 4 remaining cases under consideration were those of missing children: Jeanette Tate, 13 of Aylesbury, Susan Lawrence, 14 of London, Martin Allen, 15 of London, and Mark Tildesley, 7 of Wokingham. For a time, the theory of a single predator or network of predators appeared plausible. However, over the years that followed, a far more complex picture began to emerge. A notorious child killer will eventually be identified as being responsible for at least 4 of the victims discussed during those meetings: Scottish serial killer Robert Black. Black would later be convicted of the murders of Jennifer Cardy, murdered in 1981, Susan Maxwell, murdered in 1982, Caroline Hogg, murdered in 1983, and Sarah Harper, murdered in 1986. Other names on the list would become associated with a different group entirely. Several victims were linked to a later convicted pedophile network known as the Dirty Dozen. Members of the group, including the notorious Sidney Cooke, would eventually be convicted of the murders or manslaughter of Jason Swift, Barry Lewis, and Mark Tildesley. These developments helped dispel the theory that one individual or organization was responsible for all the child killings being examined. Instead, investigators found themselves confronting the grim reality that multiple predators had been operating during the same period. Nevertheless, Sean McGann's murder remained unresolved. On May 13, 1989, detectives confirmed that they would be interviewing 4 convicted pedophiles in connection with Sean's murder. These men were Leslie Bailey, Robert Oliver, Stephen Barrell, and Sidney Cooke. All 4 were already behind bars following their convictions in connection with the killing of Jason Swift. Detectives were particularly interested in speaking to Sidney Cooke because of his suspected links to a number of fairground-related child murders. The possibility that Cooke or one of his associates may have crossed paths with Sean could not be ignored. These men, along with others, would later become infamously known as the Dirty Dozen Gang, suspected in multiple child killings in addition to crimes for which they had already been convicted. But despite the attention they attracted, the interviews produced little value. The men either denied any involvement in Sean McGann's murder or refused to cooperate with detectives altogether. On June 18, 1991, Northamptonshire detectives publicly ruled out Leslie Bailey of the Dirty Dozen Gang in relation to Sean's murder, stating there appeared to be no evidence connecting him to the case. At the time, Bailey had just recently been sentenced to life imprisonment for the horrific abduction and murder of 6-year-old Mary Lewis in London. Yet another promising line of inquiry that had came to nothing. The case of Sean McGann remained open, but it was increasingly dormant, with police still no closer to identifying the person responsible for killing the Northampton schoolboy. Then came a major bombshell. In 1991, the McGann family received an anonymous letter at their business address. Police would later describe the contents as containing important or really relevant information regarding Sean's murder. The writer claimed to possess knowledge about the identity of the killer and key details surrounding the case. Significantly, the letter was sent directly to the McGann's family business address rather than their home, a detail police later highlighted when publicizing this correspondence. The exact wording from this letter has never fully been released publicly in order to protect the integrity of the investigation, but detectives have consistently emphasized its potential significance. Importantly, it was not a confession from the killer himself. The mystery surrounding the letter only deepened with time. The envelope and handwriting sample would eventually be released publicly in April 2019 as part of the 40th anniversary appeal. Police urged anyone who recognized the handwriting or writing style to come forward. During this 2019 review, DNA was said to be recovered from the letter. That DNA has since been examined using modern forensic techniques and continues to be assessed, although no public breakthroughs or confirmed match has ever been announced. In the decades that followed, the Sean McGann murder file had gathered dust. From time to time, it would be reopened as part of wider reviews into unsolved child murders across the UK, but each fresh examination ended the same way, with no breakthrough and no answers. But as of the airing of this documentary, the murder of Sean McGann remains an active and unsolved case. More than 4 decades have passed since Sean left his grandparents' home carrying that £1 coin looking forward to the Funfair. The McGann family, who have largely remained out of the public spotlight in recent years, have spoken of thinking about Sean every single day. For them, the passage of time has brought no closure. His memory endures in Northampton as a poignant reminder of a gentle and well-liked boy whose life was tragically cut short. A boy who set out for a local fair on a spring evening in 1979 and vanished into one of Northamptonshire's most enduring mysteries. Above all else, Sean McGann should be remembered not for the way he died, but for the life he lived. A much-loved son, brother, grandson, and friend, Sean was just 15 years old when his future was taken from him. His memory lives on, and our thoughts remain with the family and friends who continue to carry that loss every day. Thank you for watching and listening to Sean's story. Please feel free to add your own thoughts, comments, and theories down below, and we'll see you next time.